Okay, welcome to our lecture on understanding the square of opposition. Now, the square of opposition is probably something that, unless you've done some more advanced study of logic, you've probably never encountered before. It's a useful tool in that it's a good way to start kind of processing claims logically, and when you start using the square of opposition, it starts putting you into the mindset to start understanding things from a logical perspective, or applying the principles of logic to claims that are being made. So the square of opposition itself is just a simple square, AE at the top and IO at the bottom. Now, in order to understand how the square of opposition works, is that you have to remember that a proposition is not the same as just any old sentence, right? A proposition takes a very particular form, and that form is noun, copular verb, noun, noun. The copular verb is tricky because you've probably never heard that particular descriptor used, right? But all a copular verb is or are, right? And that's very, very simple. That means that if the verb of your sentence, if the verb of the claim that you're looking at, the proposition, is not is or are, it's wrong, right? Straight up, right from the beginning, it is either is or it is are. It has to be one, can't be both, can't be anything else, right? So this first noun, then, we call the subject term. And the other noun we call the predicate term, right? And these are the names that they have, and these are important in terms of the arrangement. Now, that means that our proposition will always take the form of the subject term, is or are, predicate term. And that's what a proposition looks like. Always looks exactly that way. And remember, the subject term and the predicate term, those both have to be nouns, all right? Now, the subject term can refer to either an entire class of objects or part of that class. This is what we call the number, or the quantity of the proposition. And the quantity is either universal, and that refers to all, or particular, that refers to some. But it's not quite that simple. There's also a quality to it. Either affirmative, all, or negative, none. Right? And so from this, then, we're able to generate four possible proposition types, right? Our A proposition in the upper left-hand corner of the square, that is the all are. The E proposition over in the upper right-hand corner, that is none are. The bottom left-hand corner, that is some are, and the bottom right-hand corner, that is some are not. And we call these, universal affirmative, all are, universal negative, none are, particular negative, that's down in the lower right-hand corner, some are not, and the particular affirmative, some are, in the lower left-hand corner. So four variations on any particular proposition, depending on the quantity and the quality expressed. So that's the A, E, I, and O. Now, don't try and figure out why they're A, E, I, and O. They're abbreviations of Latin terms, and I'm never going to ask you that on a quiz. So if you want to look it up for your own kind of personal sense of satisfaction, that's great. Right, so understanding A, E, I, and O. That's what we're after here. Now, the relationship between A and E is such that they are contraries. And that's that A is the contrary to E, and E is the contrary to A. Now, I and E are contradictory to one another. That means they're the exact opposite of one another. Where one is particular, the other is universal. Where one is affirmative, the other is negative. And the same is true with the relationship between A and O. They're also contradictories in the sense that they are the exact opposites of one another. I and O are what are called subalterns. Now, I should have an infographic here for you, but I forgot to slap one together, and it just has got a gap in my lecture, I guess. But the relationship between I and A is that I is the altern, or the subaltern, right, of A, right? It's the sub of A. And what that means is that I is included in A. If A refers to all of something, then I, which refers to some of that same thing, right, is part of A. And the same thing of O and E, right? O is the altern of E, right? The subordinate of E, sorry. And so to that extent, right, the subaltern there, O, right, is included within. Some are not is included within none. And we'll see how that kind of works here in a second, right? So, because understanding how these things relate to one another tells us kind of a lot of stuff. It's the starting point of making inferences, of making logical moves, is using this square of opposition, right? And what the square can do is it can reveal potential weaknesses in our own arguments before we even start making them. And it can open up and provide us with avenues for argumentation and refutation, either in support of our own propositions or when we are out to try and undermine others, right? So, in terms of developing our argument, whenever you're developing an argument, the first thing you have to do is specify your claim. What exactly is the claim that you are upholding? What is it exactly that you are supporting in your argument? And at this stage, it's a good idea to make sure that your claim is in that subject term, copular verb, predicate term format that is so essential to setting up a good, clear, logical syllogisms later. Right. Now, the second step is we check our work. You'd be surprised. Noun, is or are, noun is often a lot harder than you might think it is, and people run into trouble. It's because they're not used to thinking in that way, and that's just fine. That's why we check our work, right? So now if you can take a proposition and then put it into the square of opposition and generate its, contraries and contradictories and subalterns and what have you, the A variation, the E variation, the I variation, the O variation, if you can do that, then you probably have a clear, intelligently worded proposition. So, right, let's start with dogs have fleas. Now, right off the bat, we're going to look at it and say, is this term a subject term, is or are predicate term? And it's not, right? Okay, we're going to have to change it. My dog is an animal with fleas. Now, my dog, again, this is a little ambiguous. I want to know if we're referring to all or none or some are not, right? Let's clarify this. So I'm going to use the proposition now, all dogs, so the universal affirmative, are animals with fleas. And notice I put that in the A position in the upper left-hand corner. That's where the A goes, right? Now, given the A proposition, and I know where to put it, I should be able to generate the E, the I, and the O relatively quickly. I mean, this should really literally be a no-brainer, right? If the A is all dogs are animals with fleas, right? That's my universal affirmative. Then my universal negative would be no dogs are animals with fleas, right? And it's contradictory, right? The particular affirmative, the I proposition, some dogs are animals with fleas, right? And the O proposition, the particular negative, some dogs are not animals with fleas, right? And this is, I generate that out. That should be fairly simple to do. And if you're struggling to do this, it might be that you don't have a clearly worded proposition. Go back and take another look, because it literally should take you, just as quickly as we did it right here. Now, we can keep testing this further. Is it possible for both the A and the E claims to be true at the same time? Because contrary claims cannot be both true at the same time. If it's true that all dogs have fleas, it must be false that no dogs are animals with fleas, and vice versa. Same with our contraries, right? Is it possible for I and E to both be true at the same time? Is it possible for A and O to both be true at the same time? If so, there's a problem with the way that we've structured our proposition. Remember that the subalterns, right, I and O, they both can be true. If it's true that some dogs have fleas, it could also be true that some dogs do not have fleas. Okay, so we can see right away that this is a good way to make sure that our propositions are clearly worded, but it also gives us an opening, an avenue to start thinking about refutation and contra-argumentation, right? So let's say that I have advanced the claim that all dogs have fleas. Well, how many dogs do you need to come up with to prove that my claim is false? Now, you could go for the E proposition, right? And if you prove that no dogs have fleas, then you've certainly defeated or refuted the A proposition that all dogs have fleas. But wouldn't it be easier than trying to prove that no dog has fleas to just prove that one dog has fleas? Because if the O proposition, or one dog does not have fleas, right? Because if the O proposition is true, then the A contradictory to it must be false. This is a really clear, simple way of going about refutation and analysis and figuring know kind of what you have to prove and what your opponent has to prove in order to uphold a particular claim, right? So the same thing is true, right? Okay, if I'm going to claim that some dogs are animals with fleas, I put my opponent of having to prove that no dogs are animals with fleas in order to refute my proposition. So I've taken a much stronger position than if I had taken it upon myself to defend an A proposition. For me, folks, I would always rather be in a position of defending a particular claim and make my opponent defend those universals. They're much, much harder to prove, right? So the square of opposition is a simple and useful logical tool, something that you can use to start checking your work, because if your propositions aren't properly in order, if they're worded poorly, then that's going to make developing a logical syllogism down the road just so much harder. So using the square of oppositions is a good way of kind of checking our work, but then also a good way of starting to develop those first inferential moves that make logic so, I was going to say fun, but no, I'm going to stick with fun. I'm going to go with fun.